Hi there, this is Morgan with Morgan Burke's Photography and Product Shop, and today we're going to take a quick look at the Curves tool. This is the photo I'm going to be working on today. It's pretty dull, it just came out of RAW, and I'm going to show you how I would process it just quickly using Curves. So I'm going to go down here to my adjustment button and hit Curves, and then zoom in a little so we can see what we're doing. Actually, I'll zoom out just so we can see the full photo first. If you've never used Curves, this is what it looks like. This diagonal line represents your photo as it is right now. And so this bottom corner represents your shadows. As you can see, the little gradient here on this side gets darker at the bottom, so does this one. This corner represents your shadows, and this corner where the two highlight gradients meet represents your highlights. And then everything in between is your midtones. So if you drag this line up, you're going to brighten, and if you drag it below the diagonal, it's going to darken. You can also do several points on this. You can do, as I get closer to the highlights, that's what we're adjusting here, is brightening the highlights. But let's say that you wanted to maintain your shadows. You just keep this part of the line over towards the shadow end. You just keep it down towards the darker side. And what this is called is an S curve. And of course, the more you do it, the more it'll look like an S. But basically, it adds contrast when you do an S curve. You're maintaining your shadows, or in some cases deepening them further, and then you're also increasing your highlights. So again, if your line is straight across, to brighten, we want to brighten our highlights here, or our brighter midtones. We just raise the line up. And then if you notice that this brightens your shadows and you don't really want that, you want to keep this line over towards the shadow end a little bit further down to keep it dark. And so you can see our adjustments here. It kind of just gives a little boost. And as you can see, this little spot on her nose gets blown out, so does part on her leg. So in that case, you can use your layer mask here and then mask off those certain areas to make sure those don't get too bright or blown out. There we go. Okay, so also, this photo was shot in an area with lots of greenery. So as you can see, the more we brighten the photo and increase the contrast, the more you can see this yellowy greenish look to her skin. And so curves can also be used to adjust color tones. And so what we're going to do, let's call this one our S curve. That's for contrast. We'll call that S curve, and then we will open another curves adjustment here, and we'll, instead of RGB adjusts the light and shadow, we're going to select blue. And I'm selecting blue because this green tone on her skin actually is a yellow, and the opposite of yellow in Photoshop is blue. So we're going to grab blue, and we are going to, again, this diagonal line represents our photo as it is now. And if we're in blue, you have to think about whether or not you're adding or increasing blue, and in what part of your photo. Are you increasing blue in the shadows? Are you increasing blue in the highlights? In this case, this is mostly the shadowy midtones of her skin that have that green tone. The highlights seem to be all right. So what we're going to do is we are going to drag the midtone up a little bit, just to give her that creamy skin look. Again, it does look a little cool right now, but as you can see, the green and the yellow from her skin is alleviated a bit here. So if we undo it, it's a little less yellow than it was before. And you can do this as much as you like. You can increase it a lot and then use your layer mask to mask it on and off. I'm just going to do a little bit. There we go. It looks a lot very cool right now, but what we're going to do is use our layer mask. So again, we said that the highlights were okay. I don't want to make the highlights too cool. So up here towards the highlights, I'm just going to remove the blue from those a little bit. Just a tiny bit. We don't want to get too much yellow going on in here. But basically, I just want to make sure those are a little bit lighter. And then we can select this layer mask and hit Control-I, and now we'll invert it. And now you can really see how yellowy green it made her look. So select your white brush, and then we can zoom in here and paint this color from our curves layer onto her skin. And so I'm going to do this at 20% opacity and just get it to balance out here, get some of that green out. And as you can see, she does look a little bit cool, but once you brighten her up, that color cast will kind of go away and she won't look as cool. I'm going to put some of this on her teeth because with that green tint, they don't look as pearly white as they could. So again, we're just kind of looking over anywhere that that yellowy green tone is at, and we're just going to kind of paint it out here underneath her eyebrows a little. You want to be careful not to go over the shadows because it will add blue to the shadows, and then you'll have some cool tint there. And we just kind of want to keep it on the midtones, mostly on her skin here. So just painting in this to negate that green color. And then again, you can go over the whole image. You can do it anywhere in her hair that there might be too much green, anywhere on the photo. If you did want to add some blue to the shadows, you could paint that in as well, but we're not going to do that. So the next thing I'm going to show you is just a simple brighten, and we're going to use curves again. And in this case, we want to brighten, but we don't want her to look flat. So we want to kind of keep those shadows down a little bit more. Not quite an S curve, just a tiny little bit, just making sure that the shadows kind of stay constant. And this brightening is really bright. So we're just going to bring it down a little bit and bring this one a little bit more. Because as you can see, if we started out, if we started out, excuse me, up here, and then we brought our shadows down, and then we're like, oh, I don't like that, let's bring this highlights down. What eventually happens is you lose contrast. You're brightening the shadows and you're darkening the highlights, which takes your contrast away, as you can see. So you want to avoid that. If you move your highlight slider up too far, just bring your shadows, make sure you're readjusting your shadows slider to make sure that they look good together. And I think that looks pretty good. We're just going to paint this on again. So we're going to hit Control I, and then we are going to grab our white brush and paint this anywhere in the onto her skin that we want to kind of brighten up a little bit and add some depth. And so here on this part of the photo, we're at 20% opacity. I'm just going to paint this under her eyes, over her eye a little. I just want to make sure that it's not too dark. And this one is kind of hidden by her hair, so you don't want to brighten that one as much. That one's okay if it's hidden in there. And then what you can do is you can go over any areas of the skin that the highlights kind of fall and give it like a glowy brighten here. Just, oops, make that smaller. And then we'll just kind of go over these little spots on her skin where the light hits and increase the brights and the highlights there. And so then we'll back out and do the same here. Her skin already seems pretty glowy, but you could paint this on if she wasn't already so bright there. And that's how you would do that. Now let's say that we wanted to kind of pull her away from the background a little. We like her bright, but we want to darken the background up. What you could do is open another curves layer and just drag this line down. And in this case, you drag it down and you can see that these highlights, they stay right where they're at. They're kind of stationary up there. So they add some contrast already. You can bring those highlights down this way if you wanted to. I don't want to, but that's an option that you could take if you wanted. So then what we'll do is we will also Control I to invert that, and then we will paint these shadows where we want them. And I'm going to up my brush there. I just hit the 8 on my keyboard and it brought my my brush opacity to 80%. And then I'm just going to paint this shadow on where I want it. And just kind of pull her away from that background a little. And you can increase the shadow on her as well. This is at 80%, so you definitely want to lower. I'm doing it quickly here, but you could lower it if you wanted. And then also, since we're painting in these shadows, I want to make sure that I keep some on her skin too. So at 10% opacity, I just hit the 1 on my keyboard, I'm going to paint some shadows in here. Where I think that they would naturally kind of fall and just give her a little bit of depth. And so I'm going to sweep some underneath her lip here, right here at the bottom of her chin, over here underneath her hair, and then a little bit over here in this little dimple just to make her cheek pop. And I think that looks pretty good. If I hadn't already darkened her leg, you could come over there and do that. You could sweep this over anywhere else that she kind of has a shadow, anywhere her skin is pressed up against herself, her arm is pressed up against her body, excuse me. And so that way it gives us a little bit of depth. You could do some on her nose too, just add a little shadow here, maybe underneath her brow bone there. And then that way you can turn, you can see that we really added some depth here. And so to see your total changes, zoom out, and then you can hold down your Alt or Option key on your keyboard and click your background layer. And then you can see the changes that we've made here. And obviously this is just a quick edit. You could definitely take your time with this, go in here and play around. I just wanted to give you a quick look at curves in case you are stumped. I'll get a lot of questions about curves, people who've switched over from Elements, which doesn't have curves, and then also people who are new to Photoshop or find curves intimidating. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, you can email me at morgan@morganburks.com, or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/morganburksphotography. Thanks so much and have a great day.